welcome everyone to the lockdown learning series from the ICT Skillnet Ireland. Today it's about when the rule book goes out the window. My name is Anthony McCauley. My background is in research and development for the last 10 years, formerly working with Fujitsu around the healthcare space. I'm also the chair of the ICT Skillnet Expert Group. And most recently, I've been advising Skillnet Ireland, which is a fantastic organisation, and it's given me an opportunity to see firsthand what has been happening with respect to the changes that are occurring as a result of COVID-19. So as I said, today's presentation is about when the rule book goes out the window. And it's about trying to look at how do we identify and develop new opportunities, new market opportunities. Now, there's a series of activities in terms of launching and growing opportunities, but I'm going to focus primarily on identifying those. Okay, so as we can see, our world has changed significantly over the last number of months, as is aware to all of us. Remote working is now becoming the norm. As you can see in a recent study from CSO, nearly 70% of us are now working remotely at home. There's a huge uptake now in people eating out, and it's resulting in the likes of Deliveroo, Postmates, Uber Eats themselves being disrupted because the hospitality industry is now pivoting and is delivering services through remote technology. It's touchless everything. We're paying through contactless because of the challenges presented by COVID-19. And if we listen to Martin Crowley over at the HSE, as a result of COVID-19, healthcare research has now accelerated in the last 3 weeks by 3 years within the HSE and within our healthcare system. And we are all becoming self-sufficient again. The pandemic has now confined us to our homes. We're making baking, we are cooking, we are growing our own vegetables, we are doing our DIY. So things are changing and society is changing. And as a result of that, business is challenged, but there are new opportunities and there is no better time than now to look at what those new opportunities are. And therefore, what I intend to cover over the next 30 minutes or so is how do you identify what those new opportunities are? How do we play in the market? How do we compete? How do we protect what is unique to us? How do we then build a business model around it? How do we establish a customer fit? And then how do we identify whether we have the culture in order to be able to deliver that new opportunity? And one of the things I would like to stress is strategy in this case is not a dirty word. We need to make sure that whatever we do is aligned to our business strategy. And I've put a little image on the left there, and it's from January 2008. And if there was one takeaway from today, it would be to go off and read that. It's only about 5 or 6 pages, but it's probably the best 5 or 6 pages you'll read in terms of how you develop a strategy from Robert Kaplan and David Norton. Because if you're going to do anything in this space and you don't have a strategy, well, then you're just simply wasting money and you might as well burn it. At least you'll get some heat from it. But otherwise, you're not going to get the value that it deserves. In terms of what are the opportunities and how do we go about them, there are broadly 2 approaches to building a new opportunity, and that is to exploit or to explore. And exploit is about competing. It's about getting down and dirty. It's about competing with your competitors, and that can be through cost. You can be a Ryanair and you can be a cost leader, or you can differentiate yourself in terms of the service that you offer. But it is down and dirty and competing and making sure that you are the best and excelling. The other option is for you to explore, and there are different ways in which you can explore. You can disrupt a new market, or you can create brand new markets of their own. Disruptors like to introduce change to build more convenient, more inexpensive versions. Just blue ocean strategists are looking for brand new value, and we will look at both of them. Ideally, what you're looking for with a blue ocean strategy is a bit like a ball coming out of the back of the scrum. You pick up the ball and you dodge the opposition, as opposed to exploit, where you get stuck in and you compete. And in terms of the strategic plays, I've just put on the right there, there's 3 books that if you're interested in these, I'd strongly advise you to look at. That's Competing Aggressively, which is The Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter, who'd probably be seen as the father of strategy. There's Clay Christensen's book with respect to the innovator's dilemma, and that talks in detail about the whole area of disruptive innovation. And then Chan Kim and Rennie Moborn came up with the Blue Ocean Strategy, and you can have a look at their book. So what's Blue Ocean Strategy look like? And Blue Ocean Strategy is based on this concept of the strategy canvas. And if you look online, you'll see these strategy canvases, and it's based around these critical success factors. And what you do is you look at those critical success factors and you identify where you can create uncontested market space. So you're looking at where can you eliminate or reduce some factors, and where do you want to accelerate and elevate others. And one of the examples that they give in the book, the Blue Ocean Strategy book, is Cirque du Soleil. And it's an extremely good example, because what you see is they've taken an experience, which was the circus, and they've moved it into an event. They've raised and created new value around unique venues. They've created themed events, and they've introduced the whole idea of artistic music and dance. And they have created an extravaganza. Similarly, iTunes tapped into a market when there was a lot of piracy around music, but they caught on with the growth of the iPhone, and they created the iTunes, allowing people to play music anytime, anywhere through their smartphone. And what you'll see is this concept of, as I said, you eliminate and you reduce those factors which where you don't want to compete, and you create and you raise the factors where you do create, and that gives you that blue ocean, that new market opportunity where you can leave the others behind. As I said, maybe coming out of the back of the scrum and stepping to the side and running off with the ball. Market disruption is a little bit different. Here the focus is on maybe the forgotten customer, the silent majority, those for which maybe a product or service has just become too expensive, and therefore they're looking for something maybe a little cheaper, a little bit more convenient. And it's based around this concept on the left, this era of ferment or saturation. And are you going to be an early adopter for these technologies? Or are you going to be up where the market is already saturated? And this is where disruptors are. They're at the point where the market has been saturated, customers are looking around for something new, and the disruptor enters. And for a lot of my time, I was working in the healthcare space, and I was trying to introduce healthcare solutions into ICU wards to allow them to manage patients. And that was a significant challenge. And over the last week, as you can see, the chasm, this chasm in terms of getting people to adopt technology has now been overcome, because the idea of remote healthcare is now something that people are clamoring for because of COVID-19. So similarly, you can see markets being disrupted and challenged. Coursera has been introduced now. It's disrupted the online learning market. Web doctors are now are disrupting the GP market. Netflix destroyed and killed off Blockbuster. Uber is disrupting the taxi market and other forms of transport and takeaway food. Zillow is disrupting the real estate market. So these people are looking for new ways of delivering services more cheaply or more conveniently. And as a result, they are disrupting. And typically disruptors come in and they deliver something minimal, but it's effective. And if you look back at the first iPhone, there was no GPS on it, and you had a 2 megapixel camera. But because it was something new, it delivered something unique, it had an experience, it took off, and the market was disrupted. And they didn't disrupt the telephone market. What they disrupted primarily was the PC market. In terms of a competitive strategy then, once you've identified your play, whether it's being a disruptor or whether you want to create a new market, you need to build assets around what you've done. So you need to look at what is it that is unique about what you are providing. And typically that comes in the form of intellectual property. And you need to protect it. And you can do that through patents. and therefore you make sure that that is unique to you. You also need to look at building relationships. How can you identify complementers? And you see this now increasingly that, and you see it with the iPhone, where you have the App Store and you have people are developing apps. Because of that, there's an attraction factor to that device. So you need to be thinking about, can you build relationships that bring value and add value to the service or product which you are developing? And therefore, there is an attraction factor. And then capabilities. For a long time, I spent for the 10 years working with data scientists and working with clinicians. And we were building up very, very particular expertise around, as I said, emergency medicine, but also around drug development and drug repurposing. And they were skills that were very, very unique and therefore not easy for others to acquire. And therefore, you're building barriers. You're building barriers to entry for your service. But most importantly is the organizational culture. Have you got the ability to build the culture around the service or product that you are developing so that your organization can take advantage of it? And there is a little model, it's called a VRIO model, and it's again by Michael Porter, and it looks at the whole area of sustained advantage. And I'd encourage you to have a look at that. One of the things then is, how do you build your customer base? And increasingly what you're seeing in terms of customer bases is the platform model. And this idea that you subsidize one side of the model. And by doing that, you are attracting in the more profitable side. And you see this with the games industry. Effectively, games consoles are given away. And therefore that attracts in developers, because they see that lots of people are using those devices. And that in itself then gives weight to the games that are being developed, the variety of the games and the quality of the games. So the whole idea of that model, Uber uses it as well in terms of giving away their app, but then they charge taxi drivers. But the whole idea is that lots of people are using the app, and therefore you have a huge market. You'll see the same with COVID-19 response, these tracing applications. That's solely based on lots of people using the app, and it doesn't work unless you have lots of people using the app, because then the tracing facility works quite well. So it's a case of building assets, minding those assets, and then ensuring that you're building a business, a customer base using an effective model. And as I said, maybe the platform model is something that you should look at and consider. So once you've done that, you're then looking at, how do you build a business model? You've identified your opportunity, you've identified the activities and the expertise and the uniqueness that you have. How do you build a business model around it? And the business model is very much based on this idea of a value proposition. And as I said, I spent a lot of time with healthcare solutions, and their value proposition was obviously the length of stay of people in the hospital. And that was a huge pain reliever for ICU wards. The sooner you had, and you can see it now in terms of ICU, the sooner you get people out of that ward, the better. The cost is extremely high, but also in terms of the patient themselves, they recover quicker in a non-ICU environment, simply because of the psychological impact of being in a high care environment. So you're looking for things that, as I said here, are curing a real pain, a real challenge, as opposed to a headache. And then you marry that value proposition into your customer profile. So if you are curing something for your customers that is significant, there is more value in it. And therefore that value is then built into a business model. Now, there are lots of different business models. I've used the business model canvas here simply because it's convenient, but there are other options. The one risk, or the one limitation with the business model canvas, is it doesn't stress competitive and growth strategy. So if you are going to use it, consider both growth and competitive strategy. And if you're interested in how you build value propositions, you can look at the value proposition design book by Alex Osterwalder and his business model generation. Both of them very, very good books, and very clear on how you should go about building value propositions, and also how you build the business model. Remember that the value proposition is also about revenue value. And therefore, you need to think significantly about how you price what you are going to deliver. And there are a couple of techniques around the customer lifetime value, which is looking at how expensive is it to acquire customers, and then what's the revenue that you get in terms of returning the revenue return from those. And then there's the 4 C's of pricing, which looks at, the price ceiling, how high can the price be, and then what chips away at that in terms of cost and competition. But then how do you then start to test this? And this is where the customer comes in. And all the time and throughout the process, you should use your customers as an asset. You need to use your customer base effectively. Test your solutions, capture feedback, understand your value proposition, and understand what the customer is saying about your value proposition. Be value-driven, not data-driven. The phrase data-driven is used all the time now. And it's not data-driven, it's value. You need to make sure that the value is there and that the data you're collecting demonstrates that value. Data is a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. Use minimal viable products. Get something up and ready that your customers can use and they can feel and they can touch and get their feedback. Validated learning is extremely important. And for those companies that are established, it is amazing how few times they actually engage with customers and test with their customers. And on the right there, I have some of the things that Everett Rogers has come up in terms of tips for a service product adoption around relative advantage and trialability and observability. And I'd encourage you to go off. They're very simple, they're very logical, but there are things that you tend to just forget about. So I'd encourage you to go off and look at that. But the whole concept of the lean startup from Eric Ries, the design thinking playbook, these are the new ways of building products. Well, maybe not so new. They've been around for quite a while, but maybe they're not being used as effectively as they should. But it's all about getting information, feeding back from customers, identifying your customers and using them in order to understand how you position your product. What's worth talking about a little bit is, do you have the culture? As a company, are you putting in place the right types of control systems, organizational structures? Do the right people have the power to make decisions? Are you allowing people the freedom to think, to innovate, to come up with new opportunities? Are you giving them the autonomy then to do what they need to do in order to make those a reality? And this is critically important. The whole idea of culture and leadership and challenging your organization and understanding what it is that will allow you to continue to exist and develop is extremely important. And this concept of strategic drift is something that organizations just get comfortable. And there's been plenty of examples over the years of companies who've just got too comfortable with their market space. They've sat on their laurels, and they haven't created the culture, they haven't created the dynamism, they haven't created the ambition in order to deliver continuous, sustained competitive advantage. And as a result, they're gone, or their market position has been significantly weakened. And one of the tools that you can use is called the cultural web. And the cultural web simply looks at different aspects of your environment, the symbols, the stories, the rituals. Are you the type of organization that likes to run around and fix stuff? And you're always being reactive, and strategies may be a dirty word, and you're not being proactive, but you go home at the end of the day exhausted, and that feels good because you may have fixed something. And maybe that's the wrong type of culture. Maybe you need to sit back and you need to think and you need to strategize and you need to consider and you need to plan and you need to put in place the type of procedures and rewards that encourages that type of activity. So as I said, the cultural web is there. You should use it. It's a little tool. What you do is you look at the types of behaviors that you want to encourage around symbols and stories, etc. So you look at where are we at now and where do we desire to be, and then you put in place the necessary transition or transformation programs in order to allow those things to take place. You'll probably be saying, God, Anthony, there's an awful lot in this. How do we do it? How do we go from where we are today to engaging and developing these types of activities? Well, at the ICT Skillnet, I've had the pleasure of developing an innovation excellence program, which looks at how firms who have maybe struggled in the past and they've had loads of goes and failed, and that's good, because you've learned from your mistakes. But it's an opportunity for us to give you a hand to start to look at how we can assist you. And we've developed this excellence program. It's around 12 workshops. It's over a 16-week period. And it goes through many of the things I've just talked about. The whole idea of making sure that you qualify your business opportunity out on the left there, that you understand your environment, so you understand who are you competing with and how can you compete best with them. You identify the opportunities and the challenges that are out there, and you then map a value. You come up with those opportunities and you map a value proposition so that you make sure that you are fixing a real pain for your customers. So you come out with an environmental scan and you'll have an early stage plan, and then it's mapping it to the customer experience, building those prototypes, getting engaged with your customer, getting their feedback, pivoting if you need to pivot. That's good. Pivoting is good. That means you're learning and you're gaining experience and you're delivering something that your customer, whether it's an internal customer or an external customer, that they are going to use. And then you reach the landing zone and you're at the point where you're ready to start to introduce that into your environment. You'll have your minimal viable products. And then you're beginning to build that mature capability. You're building your playbook. You're building your expertise so that you can do this again and again and again. And every time you get better and you deliver more value to the customer. And at the end of this, we'll do what's called a business asset operational review to sit down and say, look, we've gone through this. What's the experience been? Have you developed the types of skills that you need? Do you have the playbook that you need? And so on. And therefore, it's a hand-holding exercise. It's based on experience that I've had, that ICT Skillnet has had, that Dave Feenan has had, and that all the different contributors to the expert group have had, and the wider family in terms of the member companies have had in terms of building this type of innovation and this type of excellence. So if you are interested and if you're sitting there and saying, yes, this is something we've tried and we really haven't got a handle on, then this program is for you. And I'd encourage you to come along and have a look at it and get involved. And, it's fun as well as being delivering value. In terms of just wrapping up, as I said, it's about when you're building these new opportunities, and COVID-19 is going to throw up all sorts of opportunities. You can see companies pivoting. I was just looking at this company called Carn Hill, and they're building antiviral door handles. These are a joinery shop, and they've had to pivot. You're looking at the hospitality industry at the moment. They're pivoting. They've gone from restauranting to becoming takeout businesses. It's happening all around us. So there are lots of different opportunities. I was looking at snow blowers for creating snow, and now they're using it to sanitize large spaces, large environments. So it's about aligning your opportunities to your strategy. It's about considering your market play, as I said. Are you going to compete? Are you going to get down and dirty? Are you going to be a cost leader? Are you going to differentiate yourself? Are you going to disrupt? Are you going to find a new market, that blue ocean? How do you protect your play? Where's the value? Where's the rarity? How do you make sure you can't be imitated? And can you put the organizational structures around it to make sure it grows and delivers value? And then how do you align your business value, your business model, and your value proposition? And we've looked at that. So you look at your value proposition canvas, your business model canvas, and use your 4 C's and use your customer lifetime value to make sure that you're delivering it at a price that is competitive. And then build relationships. Use your customers as an effective asset, as a sounding board to determine what you are delivering is going to be of value to them. Pivot, test, that's good. Failing, that's even good. It's all about learning and delivering something. And design thinking and lean startup methodologies are there in order to help you and to assist you. And then finally, it's about, can you build the culture that you need, and can you change it? And I've given you this little tool, it's called the Cultural Web, to allow you to do that. And finally, as I said, if you're out there and you're thinking, yes, this is for us, we want to do it, we want to have a go, the Skillnet Ireland have come up with the Innovation Excellence Programme, and there's also the Masters in Innovation. And one of the things I should have said around pricing is that Karen Dunn will be looking at SME resilience, and she'll go into more depth around the whole area of pricing next week. And I think that is it. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions. You alluded to the VRIO model. Can you give me some information more about the VRIO model? Yes, I mean, the VRIO model is around making sure that you position a product or a service so that it is unique, and it's about value. Does it deliver value? Is it rare? So are the assets, are the resources, is the IP rare? Is it not easy to imitate? And then can you build an organizational model around it? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is, are we taking advantage of the product or service that we are delivering? Are we putting in place the types of people, the types of culture around that that's going to allow us to deliver that solution effectively? So it's the VRIO. It's at the point where you're assessing the value proposition and the uniqueness, and it's worth considering. Patents are they expensive? You better believe it. They're very expensive. Can you deploy other mechanisms to protect IP? Yes, secrecy. Coca-Cola have been a big adopter of secrecy. The Coca-Cola recipe, as I understand it, is not protected by IP, but it's a trade secret. So trade secrets tend to be less expensive. In terms of IP and the whole patent thing, it is considerably expensive. I think for us to register IP was something between 12 and 15K. But yeah, trade secrets are another way that maybe you can consider in terms of minimizing those costs. What are the tests? And these 5 tests are actually, they're quite simple. Relative advantage. Is the product that is it giving you a relative advantage? Is it delivering something that the competition aren't able to deliver? Is it doing it cheaper? Is it doing it easier? Is it doing it better? Is it providing you with value that you don't get elsewhere? Can you trial it? Can you use it? I was in the States some years back, and I remember trialing the Segway. You could get on, they had these little spots in the park where you could go on and you could step on the Segway and you could go off and use it. And I thought it was a very innovative way of getting people used to using them. Observability, you need to get your product out there. You need to get people using it, and therefore you need to get other people seeing those people using it. So observability is getting your product out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, so you get a critical mass. You get people seeing that product in use, and therefore they want to use it too. Particularly relevant to early adopters and influencers. You really want to get those people who are going to start blogging about your tool or your service or your product. Compatibility then is, does it fit in with your lifestyle? Are you going to be able to use this thing effectively? So when you're building for your customer base, you need to be building something that they're going to be able to use and use it effectively. And complexity, well, I said it speaks for itself. It's the easier it is to use something, the better. The more complex, the more difficult it becomes. So it's about those 5 areas: relative advantage. Can you use it? Can you observe people using it? Is it compatible with your lifestyle? And is it easy to use in itself? And you reduce the complexity of it. What is the business model canvas? And the business model canvas is a way of thinking about all the aspects that you need to build around whatever that product or service is. So if you go online and you look at things like Strategizer, you'll see that you can download this canvas. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to fill it in. Rather than going through a long-winded, very detailed document, you have a single canvas on which you can look at what are the types of partners that you need to engage with, what are the types of activities, what are you going to be doing, are you going to be developing, are you going to be selling, are you going to be building, whatever it is, what resources do you need, are there software resources, are there hardware resources, what are the costs, what type of revenue model are you going to use, how are you going to be selling this, so what type of is it going to be a license model? Is it going to be a razor blade model? And so on. And then what are the channels? How are you going to access the customer base? And one of the important areas here is customer relationship. And the whole area of customer relationship is, obviously building relationships, but more than that, it's customer engagement. How do you engage with customers? And this idea of testing and engaging through design thinking and lean startup methodologies is a fantastic way of getting customers interested in the product or solution that you're developing, because that in itself will build a customer base. So it's not just CRM, it's CEM. Make sure you're engaging customers and identifying the right segments, that whole idea of segmenting customers and making sure that they're the right ones. In terms of innovation, what types of mistakes do people make is a question. And I think one of the challenges around the whole area of building new opportunities is building the wrong thing. And therefore, in terms of mistakes, I think the biggest mistake that people make is, number one, not testing their concept or their hypothesis as early as possible. Encouraging their customer base to look at these solutions and get them using them, get it into their hands as soon as possible. I think that's very, very interesting. Is there such thing as an innovation standard like ISO 27001? Well, there is an innovation standard. It's an innovation guideline, which is 56002. And the 56002 is a set of guidelines which has been developed by the National Standards Authority and the ISO around how do you do innovation. Now, innovation is a little bit different to what I've been talking to here today. This is more about building business models around it. But the whole idea of building innovation and building culture is covered by the 56002. And if you go online, I think you can download the guidelines that are available through the NSAI. But you don't have to do that, because if you look at the Innovation Excellence Program, we've built that around those things. So if you get involved with that, what we've done is we've made sure that we've aligned that to best practice. And therefore, what you're getting through the program is a set of guidelines and a method and a playbook that's going to be aligned to what the ISO has come up with and what the NSAI has come up with, which is a very, very good standard, because it's been something that's been something like 7 years in the making. And it's been developed by some of the best minds with respect to innovation. So you're coming up with something and using something that is pretty standard and that goes through all the various tools and technologies. Not all the ones I've used here, as I said, because it's more focused on innovation. But it gives you a very good basis for you to develop the playbook that I've talked about, and then to use that playbook. And the innovation excellence, building that excellence, that playbook, so that you can use it again and again and again, and you can build up that internal expertise. One of the final things that I should say is companies are particularly challenged with innovation, and it may be something that they'll never get a handle on. And what options are open to them if they can't get to if they're not building those business opportunities? And the other option is, of course, to look and collaborate. And co-creation, collaboration, building partnerships, which is very much what the ICT Skillnet does and what Dave Feenan does. It's about brokering relationships with those people who may be in areas of business where you want to venture. And therefore, the opportunity is for you to co-create with them and to collaborate with them and to outsource the type of business development that I'm talking about here. And that's not a bad thing. It's a recognition that you want to focus on maybe business as usual activity. And what you want to do is you want to allow others to look at your business for you, to engage with your customers, and to build products and solutions in a protective way, in a way that makes sure that that it's you that's delivering the value ultimately to them. But collaboration and co-creation is increasingly becoming a means by which solutions and services are being delivered for customers, because there's a realization that maybe large organizations just cannot do these type of things. They've just become too set in their ways, and therefore they're going beyond their own bailiwick, and they're starting to engage with other companies. Next up will be Karen Dunn, which is going to talk about SME resilience. That's at the same time next week. And then after that, there's Boris Cargill, who's looking at AI and the reverse arc of digitization. And then Horacio, which is where are all the clouds gone? I think the whole reticence towards clouds and wearable technology and IoT, that seems to have all gone out the window now, because we just have to embrace them. So I will leave it at that. I thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed. As I said, if you're interested in the Innovation Excellence Programme, or you're interested in the Masters in Innovation Leadership, contact the IC Skillnet. Thank you all for joining, and we will leave it there for this week. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programmes. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.